A couple of videos ago, I mentioned a split infinitive, and one of the comments under that video was, what is a split infinitive and why is it bad? And that's a reasonable question. And although this is slightly off the beaten track for my usual type of video, I'm going to tell you about my attitude to split infinitives. I am Graniopteryx. So let's start with, what is an infinitive? Well, an infinitive is the to form of the verb. To eat, to sing, to walk, that's an infinitive. Now, in Latin, you can't split the infinitive. It's impossible, because the infinitive is an ending on the word. Ambulare, for instance. The infinitive is the RE at the end. So people nowadays brought up, or rather not brought up, on Latin grammar insist that English grammarians made up this rule that you can't do it in English because basically they're snobs showing off their classical education, and since you can't do it in Latin, you can't do it in English either. I disagree with that. There's a very good reason not to split an infinitive, even in English. And you will have realized that I think that from my many comments about split infinitives, which I make about particularly newspaper articles, and to its shame, very often in the Daily Telegraph of all newspapers. And my answer to that will be as follows. Remember, though, I'm not considered an authority. I'm just a humble writer. So far as I'm concerned, you can split an infinitive, but only in certain circumstances, and you have to think very carefully about what you're doing. So I'm going to give you 3 examples which I'll be using. And it's this, they are this. I went quickly to eat. I went to eat quickly. I went to quickly eat. And before I continue, let me tell you I'm talking only about writing, not speaking. The spoken language is different. Some allowance has to be made for pressure of time when talking, and in any case, often a grammatical clumsiness can be smoothed over by the tone of voice or emphasis, which isn't available in the written language, and that's the important thing to remember. And this is something that anyone listening to an AI reading of a text will recognize straight away. Anyway, as I said, I'm going to be talking specifically and only about writing. The cardinal rule about writing, the commandment, is this: thou shalt not make the reader scan the sentence twice to make sense of it. In spoken, we have to make allowance for the speaker formulating concepts as he's speaking. You might, for instance, refer to the police in the singular at the beginning of a sentence, and then in the plural later on when talking about a group of them. That's excusable in spoken, but when you're writing, you can sort all that out, and if you don't, you're just being lazy. In fact, you're being rude and inconsiderate. Now, back to my examples. I went quickly to eat. What does that mean? Well, what you're saying is that you dropped what you were doing and moved yourself smartly to get some food. The next one, I went to eat quickly. Well, that generally implies that you went to eat. How you got there isn't important, but what is important is that you downed that sandwich in record time, and now you probably have indigestion. And then there's the split infinitive. I went to quickly eat. Now, it's probable that most people would understand that the quickly refers to the eating, but it's clumsy, especially written, because what's happened is that you convey the information that you went to, but not to what. For instance, that to could be an indication of direction. I went to school, I went to the shops, and so on. So the word eat there could be a bit of a surprise. The reader must for a fraction of a second, be in a bit of a quandary about what you're saying or what you're going to say. By the way, this is a technique exploited by comedians. They build up an expectation about the sentence going in one direction and then it suddenly changes direction altogether and people laugh. So there's a place even for that. However, back to the split infinitive. Now, many apologists for the split infinitive quote the famous example of the opening credits of the original Star Trek, where Captain Kirk says, "To boldly go," and they reckon that's the clincher. Well, I did say at the beginning that there were exceptions, didn't I? Exceptions of a sort, at any rate. Let's look at what's being said here in those opening credits. First of all, without splitting the infinitive, you can say boldly to go, which in my opinion would have been better, as it puts the emphasis on the word boldly. And you could also say to go boldly, which in my opinion is pretty weak. The word boldly there is sort of tacked on at the end. Or you can say, as we know, to boldly go. And in my opinion, that's neither bad nor a split infinitive, if you regard the words boldly go as one concept, which in this case is exactly what it is. So in my opinion, that isn't a split infinitive at all. In German, for instance, boldly go would probably be a single word anyway, because that's how German combines crushed concepts of that sort. And since English is an amalgam of Latin and Germanic languages, that sort of thing will happen. So let's look at this. I went to chop wood. I went wood to chop. You would find that in poetry because it might work better in the meter of the poem. So I went to chop wood, the usual way of saying it. I went wood to chop. As I said, you'll find that in poetry or songs or that sort of thing. And then there's the split infinitive. I went to wood chop, which actually makes not much sense in English. But in that case, the word chop and the word wood do not form a single concept in the same ways as boldly and go. Sometimes it's difficult to differentiate between those two ideas, but then it's up to the writer to, between the two, sort out. May the phrase be with you. Till next time. Why not treat yourself or a favoured relative or friend to these magnificent examples of merch? The mugs and t-shirts come in the Graniopteryx design or Granbo with a firearm or the more deadly knitting needles. Go to www.graniopteryx.com and whatever platform you're watching this on, please click like, subscribe and share.